Hey, it's Travis. Too many camp directors run just on gut feel. Our free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic is your dashboard for resilience. Take it today at camp.mba/Travis. Again, that's camp.mba/Travis.
This is CampHacker. Come find our show notes and our blog for camp directors and leaders at camphacker.tv.
Good day and welcome to our podcast. This is CampHacker, episode 82, recorded on the 6th of May, 2015. On today's show, volumes of volunteers, advancing your program and site. If you would like easy, automatic free updates of our podcast, you can subscribe in iTunes or use the free Stitcher app. This week's CampHacker podcast is sponsored by GoCamp Pro. In a lot of ways, GoCamp Pro was built for directors just like you, people doing it all themselves. We designed this by asking ourselves, what resources do we wish that we had during our time as directors? The material will be helpful for those in their first 5 to 7 years of directing, but so much of it fits for camp directors who are looking for ways to make their camp life easier. To see Travis's quick overview of GoCamp Pro, go to gocamp.pro/inside. We hope you enjoy the CampHacker Show.
Hello, Camp Pros, and welcome to the CampHacker podcast. My name is Travis Allison. I run a blog and a podcast network about running a great summer camp at camphacker.tv.
My name's Joe Richards. I'm the Executive Director at Pierce Williams Christian Center, which is a United Church of Canada summer camp and retreat facility located in Fingal, Ontario, sort of halfway between Detroit and Toronto.
I'm David Gill. I'm the director at Ferncliff Camp and Conference Center. We're located just outside Little Rock, Arkansas. We're a faith-based summer camp program and a year-round conference center related to the Presbyterian Church, but open to any and all.
Fantastic. Well, welcome back, David. It's so great to have you.
Appreciate it.
So today's topic actually comes from David. David suggested this. He and Joe have had this conversation. He and I have had this conversation at different points about using volunteers to advance your program and your site. And David is certainly the master of it. I know that Joe and I both have experience with working with volunteers in our own camp programs, but we bow down to David's expertise in this. And we're grateful, David, for your suggestion to talk about it, because I think it's a topic that whether or not you're a nonprofit camp, you can take great advantage of volunteers for these two issues, specifically to program and site. But I wonder, David, what it was that that made you suggest that you wanted to have a bigger conversation about this.
I was thinking, if I had to list the top 5 or 10 things that have made Ferncliff a growing camp and conference center, catering to volunteers would be, certainly probably in the top 5. Over my 18 years here, we've grown from virtually no volunteers when I came to now between 10 to 14,000 volunteer hours a year.
Wow.
So that is essentially like 3 to 5 full-time year-round staff when you translate the hours in terms of the labor you receive. And ours are mostly doing physical projects around the camp, not a little bit of programmatic help, but it's more maintenance and painting and trail work and a whole variety of resources. We've been able to improve our site significantly just by having volunteers come and engage virtually every day. We have volunteers here, so that's I think that's been a key to success in the place. And so I thought other camps that maybe haven't figured out how exactly to do that, this might be a healthy discussion for us to kind of talk about the basic ropes.
Awesome. And so starting from scratch, David, what were some of the first things you did to get people thinking about Ferncliff as a place that they want to give of their time?
First thing was beginning to hire staff that were particularly maintenance staff who are volunteer friendly. Sometimes you get the camp maintenance department sometimes can be so focused on the technical aspects of the water system and the sewer system and all the buildings, and it's a pretty ambitious workload, and you often hire for the certain skill sets you need, the hard skills.
Yeah.
But I realized that it's our maintenance folks that are key to growing a volunteer program. You have to have maintenance department that can work on fixing the lawnmower, but they can also be volunteer friendly in terms of just having some people skills and being open to working with people who don't know as much as they do, but if they embrace that, then that's essential. If they don't, then it's really hard to grow a volunteer program. So part of it was just a mentality change of
right.
say, there's other folks out there that want to engage, and if you can, if you're open to, some training and teaching and doing the front end work of getting things organized and having the supplies, and then you can really get a lot more done that way. So I think first it was creating a new mentality that was volunteer friendly, that we welcome it, and we're equipped for it, and we have hospitality around it. And once people felt the welcome mat was out, then they started showing up. And I realized early on, when I first took this job, I thought, I'm going to spend all my time with, where the kids are, the churches that have young families, and the soccer moms, and that constituency. But I quickly learned that for us, our retired folks are golden in terms of the support for camp and the ability to volunteer and time and skills. And so I quickly learned that tapping their expertise and the fact that they can come Monday to Friday and volunteer, that was a real learning for me. And we began inviting them to come on, especially on weekdays, so that our maintenance staff didn't have to work every Saturday. And when we're busy with conference groups, to get volunteers who could come midweek was really important. So we began doing that, and inviting especially the retired folks to come. Then we also tapped in starting, 15 years ago. We tapped here in the States. We have AmeriCorps.
Yep.
Kind of like Vista, or kind of a domestic version of Peace Corps, and they have traveling teams of 8 to 12 college age young people looking for a year of service, gap year, et cetera. And we were able to apply and attract them, and we've probably had 30 of those teams, average 2 a year, and they come for 8 weeks. So you've got 8 to 12 enthusiastic college age young people who live on your site and work for 8 weeks on various projects, and that's became a huge source of volunteers too.
Yeah.
But we've appreciated tapping that.
I think so. A couple of really great points, and I love the idea. And really, truthfully, I hadn't felt the tension of it, but never really figured out how to address it when I was directing, of moving maintenance staff from being the curmudgeonly old maintenance person who we all sort of put up with because he or she has skills, into having them realize that part of their job is to be welcoming and to be open to helping people. And even part of the psychology of that is to be saying, maybe I don't need to be the one who's painting this wall. If I have some volunteers coming at a certain point, I could use my hard skills today on solving a bigger problem. And then these little problems that I can have volunteers, I can set up to do it well. I can start to gather those kind of projects for them when you have a well.
And I think we began realizing that, while campers are a constituency whose lives we want to positively impact, we began realizing volunteers are also a constituency whose lives we can positively impact by giving them meaningful work experiences. So it's not just what can we get out of those people, but we have something to offer. They want to engage their skills and feel like they're part of what we do out here. And so it's you begin seeing them not as a commodity or X number of hours,
Right.
but as people who really want, to become, more active, and then they move on to become donors and
Yeah.
and that too. So I think I agree. I think it's a mentality that sees volunteers not as an imposition, but as a fantastic resource, and you're willing to pay. There's some extra price that comes with volunteers. Some jobs aren't done quite as well.
Yep.
Sometimes you have to redo something. You have to organize ahead of time. You have to think things through. You have to tell them 3 times. Sometimes it depends on the skill level, but if in the end of the day, it's a huge positive if you approach it with the right mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for suggesting a topic. I'm excited to get into it a bit further. So, Joe, when you started at Pierce Williams, what was the volunteering culture like there?
Well, like David said, volunteers have any number of roles, and for maintenance, we struggled with volunteers, and I think that's due to that curmudgeonly maintenance man who's not very welcoming, or, as David said, jobs aren't always done perfectly, but and so when you have someone who's not welcoming to volunteers, or you don't have a great way to manage those volunteers, or you give them only menial tasks. So here we were struggling with volunteers and how they felt they contributed. So board members are volunteers and committee members, and they'd gone through a lot of change. We have, we have a retired contractor on site today and has been on site for a couple of weeks working with a company who's laying new sidewalks, right? And he's a volunteer for us because he used a great point. He said, Joe, if your job is to go out and find the money, you don't always know, and then to spend the money, but you don't know the specs on what you're spending it, that can actually get us into more difficulty. So if I take on like project management of that money, and I'm totally good with that because it takes the job off my plate and puts it onto his, and from a board level, that's a good thing as well because we have someone who has all that experience. Volunteers is something we've moved to you don't have to volunteer at Pierce to volunteer for Pierce, right? So we have some projects like I was at Ferncliff a couple of weeks ago, and thank you, David, for being the host of that. And we saw carpet ball, foldable carpet ball tables, which the plans are available on the carpet ball website. And I've already passed those plans along to a woodworker who's done a lot of stuff for us, but he doesn't come on site to build it. He'll build it in his own workshop, and then we go it up or he delivers to us. So it's the idea that you're getting volunteers from a variety of places. But volunteers is something, as I listen to David talk, where we really need to improve. And I think it's partially making sure that maintenance has a job list that people can do and putting that out so that people can know what they're doing before they come and can sign up for it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe mentioned this. It was kind of a revelation to me. Kind of stumbled into it. The idea of off-site volunteers, and so we've had the carpet ball tables, we've had picnic tables, gaga pits, things that can be built in somebody's workshop. It's like they don't necessarily have to come to your own camp, but you can send a set of plans, and they can do that. Half the time they go ahead and buy the materials for you anyway. So that really spreads you out in terms of being able to do more things with volunteers off site. One of the things we also did was we have housing here for volunteers, and it's not exclusively for volunteers, but we have certain times when people can live here, so we're not relegated to only commuting volunteers, and we get a lot of mission teams. All summer we'll have 9 mission teams this summer. Each week of the summer, a group from another part of the country will come here for a week, live in our retreat house. They'll pay rental fees to stay there, which is good revenue source for us. But they'll spend a day working in our disaster center and a day working on our camp, and then they'll connect with other service agencies. So I don't have to keep them busy for a whole week, but they do work here for a couple days and help us, continue to, make improvements during the course of the summer. So mission teams is a huge source of volunteer labor. But a lot of camps aren't set up to be able for teams to be able to do their own cooking. It's really hard for a volunteer traveling group to come to a place and pay rent and pay for their meals.
Right.
That gets kind of pricey. So having carving out on your facility a place that volunteer groups can live and do their own cooking, that's a huge plus. You open your door to a lot of volunteer options when you have the ability to host a team that can do their own cooking and keep their prices down.
Right. So having that facility is important. Actually, before I go too far down that direction, David, I want to come back to sending out the plans the idea that Joe introduced.
Yeah.
Is it? Do I remember correctly that you have a group of people who sort of have a community workshop, that the people in that community workshop, mostly retired folks, build a bunch of stuff for you?
Yeah.
Ferncliff?
Yeah. We have a group that kind of migrated to. We have a big 10,000 square foot warehouse, and in it we have a shop. So we have indoor working space, which is great. And this group, they call themselves the Over the Hill Gang. Somehow I don't know where they got that name. That they show up every Monday morning, and they drink coffee, argue, and then they get to work. And it's usually in that
right.
order. And
yes.
And they are a community. I mean, these guys have been together for over a decade. They, know each other well, and it's really nice to see that community. And I joke that it's also a ministry to their wives to give them something to do. The wives tell me that having a retired man around the house is like having a grand piano in the kitchen.
Right.
And so they appreciate, hey, don't you need to go out to Ferncliff and do some work, So it's, it's kind of funny that way. But they spend every Monday morning here. And so they've done picnic tables, trash barrels, wood storage boxes, bunk beds, cubbies, wardrobes. They like doing things that they can do indoors, so they don't have to get up on ladders. Yeah. They stay, safe. They can do it 12 months a year, indoor, and that's the kind of project they cater to.
Right.
And so we scramble to keep a step ahead of them and say, okay, we've rebuilt every bunk bed on the camp. We now every guest here sleeps in beds that they built, the platform beds, you can only have so many picnic tables at a camp. So I'm beginning to run out of projects. So the latest change that's just happening in the last few weeks is they're going to become a ministry of Ferncliff.
Right.
They now have invited us to solicit jobs from other agencies and say, if you guys pay for the raw material, and if you guys can come and pick it up when we're done,
nice.
Then we'll build any of these 6 or 8 things, and here's what they look like, here's what they cost, and we can crank these out for you here. So that becomes a mission of Ferncliff, and it keeps those guys busy, and it keeps me from having to manufacture, come up with more projects, once they've kind of outpaced the things we need here at camp. So we'll soon have a brochure that we'll send out to other camps in our area, other nonprofits, other ministries they would feel good about supporting, and solicit those jobs to kind of keep them engaged. So I'm excited about it. It's kind of evolved.
Brilliant.
That.
Yeah.
So
that's great. So Joe, David's talked about some of the sort of the things that volunteers have done for them in the past. Is there creative stuff that they have done for you at Pierce Williams?
Yeah, a lot of our volunteer time. There's an organization in Ontario called Volunteer Builders, and we had they bring 100 volunteers out. You sign up for them. It's essentially it was essentially you sign up 3 years in advance. A proposal, so that's a bit different. Our local volunteers have done things like hand carve all of the signs we have around camp. So when you're at camp and you see an office sign or a sign to a building, those have all been done by volunteers. All of our stilts that we use for battle stilts and for general stilting are volunteer based. We've had volunteers do a lot of finishing work on our barn that the volunteer builders helped. Volunteers also used to do things that like stuffing envelopes and whatnot, but we don't do so much of that anymore.
Right. All right. Well, we have lost Joe. I guess the internet's not doing so well at Pierce Williams this morning. We'll try to get him back on the show, but we'll continue on for where we're going. So, David, I have a good feel for, how you got things started and made it a good welcoming place for volunteers. But how do you reach out to people who, to build up the pool of people who volunteer?
Oh, it's a good question. It's generally it's been word of mouth. Volunteers kind of talk to other volunteers and call us and see if that's possible. These mission teams now we're in a manual that the Presbyterian Church puts out across the denomination, and so youth group leaders and churches looking for a mission team spot, we're kind of among the options they have. So they tend to find us through that national resource, and then after that, one person tells another is kind of how that goes. I guess when I go to retirement churches or churches in general, we always show in our PowerPoints, we always show the impact that volunteers are having at camp. So it's just kind of an ongoing part of our public relations is to share. I think each newsletter that we put out has a volunteer story about
right.
This project was just completed by volunteers, or hey, we need volunteers to help us with this project. So it's because we use so many of them. I think people who are familiar with us, know that's part of our, what you can do at Ferncliff. It's also on our website, volunteer options and things like that.
Yeah.
One of the things recently we've gotten is we call them host couples.
Yes.
They're not always a couple, but generally they have been folks who want to come and spend a month with us. And so we have housing where they can stay and do their own cooking when we're not serving meals in the cafeteria. And they simply provide hospitality. They do airport runs. They, paint a building when there's needed. So they're kind of come and willing to do anything. And when we have during our busy fall and busy spring, we try to recruit host couples who will live here and kind of be available for anything. And they're just golden. And in that network, one couple tells another couple, hey, I had a great experience at Ferncliff. Why don't you come join us this year? Or why don't you go in the fall? And, it's just kind of an informal network out there of folks who do that. So I couldn't really put my finger on any particular marketing that has found those people as well.
Right.
One other place we have found volunteers is, during summer camp.
Yes.
We pretty much rely on our trained staff, and I haven't really found great roles for untrained, unskilled folks to come and mingle with summer staff. I think there's some, I'm not sure how that would work. Maybe others have done that more effectively. But one place we have found effective for volunteers in the summer camp program is with nurses. All of our registered nurses come as volunteers, and we plugged into a university program that recruits the volunteer nurses for each week.
Yes.
And so we don't have to recruit. They are, really quality folks. And the only thing we do is let their kids come to camp for free that week.
Right.
So that's been a really meaningful connection and a great place where, they're volunteering, but their kids are here too in camp, and that's been a huge positive resource for us in terms of volunteer nurses.
Right. And I know when we were directing, so my first couple of summers directing, there were not a lot of nursing jobs available. So we were able to get recent grads who would come for the whole summer. But that hasn't been the case locally for a number of years. So it was always nice to have someone who was there for the whole summer as a sort of official staff person and nurse.
Yeah.
But we just discovered over time that it was better for us to do exactly what you're describing, have a nurse come for a week, trade them for space for their kids for in a session or a week or two. And then they sort of build the habit of coming to camp, or, they have their favorite weeks or favorite sessions to come to, and will make that a part of it. I'm glad you brought that up. Nursing really is probably the most common form of volunteering, I would think, for camps across the whole spectrum of camps.
Yeah. Of course, we have, like other faith-based camps, we have a volunteer chaplain. Every week, a different person from a different church will come and be the chaplain, and that's, there's no remuneration for that, room and board. And so that's another place I guess I would consider, volunteers plugging into our summer program, or, for instance, a van driver, to help pick up the kids from the day camp in the neighboring town. And, it's always great to have somebody who can, do those kind of things. But that's we don't have, occasionally somebody will volunteer to be arts and craft, the craft person for a week, or, we can plug, somebody into a role like that, but it's not extensive in terms of week to week.
Yeah. So, having somebody do something like driving, I think, touches on a point that Joe is going to make about our ability as camps to legally have volunteers in certain positions. Driving would be something that a lot of jurisdictions would have a hard time having a volunteer do that job because of the skills or licensing or insurance that they would have to have. What other stuff, Joe, have you found that your legal ability to have volunteers do is diminishing?
I think our legal ability is diminishing in areas, especially things like electricity, anything to do with an electrician. So, you can't touch certain areas, and if you pre-wire it, that other person is taking on all that liability if you wired it wrong and they're just coming and checking it and hooking it in for you. We found that some of those things that volunteers used to do, A, we don't have time to wait to arrange a volunteer to do it, and B, it's just done faster and more professionally when you hire someone to do your electrical things, or your plumbing and things like fixing a furnace or appliances. Those are things where you have to outsource anyway. But I think that as we move forward and we want to do things, as David said earlier, the volunteers, the work that they do isn't always as professional as you might get if you paid someone. And so part of the challenge we've been dealing with here for years is fixing long-term issues that arose because people didn't follow code when it was installed.
Right? Built by volunteers.
Yeah. So right now, for example, we just got funding to winterize one of our cabins. Our cabin is a 6-room building. It has 4 rooms of 8 and 2 rooms of 4, so sleeps 40 people. And volunteers have redone it a couple of times over the years since it was moved here in the 60s. It's a military building, and we just discovered some things about the way it's constructed, and the fact that although they said insulation was in the walls, there's actually no insulation in the walls, and those are all things that the funding will cover. But it's one of those things where you can't rely on. You have to. Institutional knowledge is this magical thing, and if a volunteer does it, you still need to be able to track the institutional knowledge of that thing that was done. Does that make sense, Travis?
Yeah. Well, and man, institutional knowledge on its own is its own show, especially for organizations that have been around for 100 years. And how do we pass on information from generation to generations? Man, it's such a good point.
The supervision of volunteers. Yeah, the supervision of volunteers is a major issue for as we said earlier, that camp maintenance people are a unique breed unto themselves, and if they're not welcoming, or if they always want to do it their own way and don't like the way somebody else is doing it, it's not to say that other person is doing it wrong. They're just doing it differently than they would do it. And as a camp director, you have to give that up for lots of stuff, right? I hire a summer camp director and program director, and if I wanted to be program director, I would just add that to my responsibility list. And I don't want to be a program director. So leaving those little you have to be willing to not micromanage people as well, and give them a task to do, and then put the parameters on, and then let them do the task, as opposed to saying opposed to micromanaging every little move they do.
Yeah.
I agree. We too kind of have to figure out what jobs are volunteer friendly and what aren't.
Yeah.
We're not going to put that, that junior high youth group that wants to come and volunteer for 3 hours on Saturday, that they're not going to fell trees and, work with chainsaws or something. So certain things lend themselves to that, trail work or, and your tools, do you have enough rakes and shovels and work gloves and things to keep people busy, meaningfully productive, safe? When 40 people want to come out and volunteer, how do you handle that? But we have to kind of think what makes sense for volunteers and what doesn't. One of the other resources you may find is that we have some national volunteer groups. For instance, we had a storm go through here, and we lost a lot of trees a few weeks ago. And there is an organization called, and believe it or not, this is their name, Baptist Men with Chainsaws. That's the name of the group. They actually have 26 chapters in Arkansas. And so we put in a call to them, and they were out here the next day with 8 fellas and chainsaws, and they got all of our trees on the ground for us in a short period of time. That's what they do. That's their ministry. The United Methodists have a group called Nomads that come with their RVs for a week, and they love going around the country doing volunteer work as a community. And so you can apply to host a volunteer team of those folks as well. So sometimes there's these national groups you can plug into who have some significant skill levels and are used to doing volunteers, well organized.
Right. One of my scariest moments with a volunteer that I caught, I had to worry about this. So I was checking frequently on this volunteer who assured me that he was. This is also when I was willing to take more chances than I would take today. But anyway, he assured me that he was fine at electrical work and had some experience to back that up. And I checked in on his work, and he was wiring things backwards. And I said to him, about what the colors and negative and positive and grounding and all of that stuff. And he's like, oh, yeah. You know how I always know? And he takes me over to his car. He opens it up and he pops at that thing. He's like, see, on my battery on my car, red is negative, black is positive. I was like, so we got him another job as quickly as we could. And we were able to check on all that stuff.
One of the other things we try to do is, keeping track of volunteer hours.
Yes.
It takes some doing to not get too far behind in that, but to be able to tell a foundation or in your annual report that you had 10,000 volunteer hours, that they realize that's good stewardship. These guys are stretching their dollars by being able to employ volunteers to get a lot of their stuff done. So it's important not only to do it well, but then to be able to articulate to others that this is another place you are being a good steward of resources. And at our annual meeting, we also do volunteer recognition. Yeah. Now out at Heifer, Joe visited when he was here. They have this really cool sweat and blister award they give people. It's funny, it's cute looking, and it's fun to, some will go home and hang it up on their wall, but they, having some kind of certificate or, a mug or something to give people, or to give a chance to kind of stand up and have your volunteer of the year recognized at your annual dinner. That again reinforces a volunteer mentality among your donors and constituents to kind of lift up those folks.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was going to say in some of thinking about the recruiting and the communication of these kind of things, that I think it's important that, as you say, David, you're recognizing volunteers in every newsletter, a public thank you, certainly thank you gifts or handwritten notes from the director or the manager, someone that they know and have become friends with as part of volunteering is important. I also think that you could do stuff like letters of reference for your teen volunteers, that it's easy enough for you to pass that on without them asking, and have a way to recognize them for that. But I think that we can do great things to thank our current volunteers and therefore help recruit more volunteers over time, because we are demonstrating daily the value that we see in these people who come to camp and give up their time. Mm-hmm. Another idea that I had and didn't implement it is just in thinking about these things since I was directing. Part of it is this, Joe, talking about passing on the information from from generation to generation. But David, do you keep track of your volunteers' address, emails, and even stuff like their skills?
We don't. We kind of know in our head, but right. We do not have a database where I can say, hey, who do I have that's had experience with chainsaws or, a skilled master builder. Right. We know some of that stuff inherently, but we don't have, we're not level having a volunteer coordinator who can kind of, really organize that. That'd be a next step. Right. One of the things we also periodically will tell our architects, okay, when you design this next building,
yes,
can you design it in a way that's volunteer friendly?
Yeah.
Because we're going to build it with volunteers, so design it in a way that makes sense, for them, and they can do that. They can kind of translate. Okay, well, we're going to do it this way because that is much more volunteer friendly than doing it this way. And so sometimes it's the design of the building or design of the project in such a way that, hey, this is labor intensive. I wouldn't do this if you're going to hire it. Yeah. But if you got volunteers, then I'll design it this way because you can do it cheaper with volunteer labor.
Right. Yeah. That's cool. And I know that a lot of the recent construction at Ferncliff has had some real thought and consideration put into environmental impact. And some of those construction projects take a little more time and labor. And has that been part of the way that you've been able to accomplish so much there?
Yeah.
Designing volunteer friendly?
That's exactly right. We couldn't have done a 5,000 square foot straw bale building without, cost effectively. We did it for $65 a square foot because we could use volunteers. Yeah. And, we were able to go green in a creative way because we had more labor than we have dollars and more creativity than we had, in our bank account. So, yes. Joe saw when we were here that, one floor is made out of beer bottles. Right. It was labor intensive, but it was capital cheap.
Yes.
One's made out of conveyor belts, one's made out of rocks, and one's literally made out of paper mache. So, yeah. And that paper mache floor was one we gave to an AmeriCorps team, said, we don't know how to do it, but here's our idea. Go to YouTube, figure it out, build the stuff, make it happen. And they loved the freedom of being able to actually take that project from a concept to reality without us telling them, okay, step 1 through 10, do it this way. We just said, figure it out, come to us if you have issues, but it's your project. And they couldn't have been prouder of that, because we invested them that level of trust.
Yeah,
that's one way to do it. But yeah, we have buildings that you couldn't have done without having a volunteer culture.
Yeah, of course. So, Joe, I'm going to start to think about wrapping us up here. Is there any thoughts that you have about creative ways to recruit volunteers or get people involved and keep them involved?
There's nothing. It's a topic that I really need
to work on, and it's a topic that I think is something where getting people to understand what you do, and especially I love David's point of, it's not the young families so much that are going to volunteer as
Right.
those retirees, and as we move into the baby boomer generation, all coming of age, there's potentially a whole lot more volunteers available to us. And I think, there's a variety of online tools in Canada and that I don't utilize very well, but it's a challenge, and I don't have great ideas on it, but I know that if I had more volunteers, I'd be able to stretch the money I can raise even further.
Right. Cool. Well, David, is there any other thoughts that you wanted to make sure that we covered today when we're talking about this?
Well, I would just say it didn't happen overnight for us. It was each year we get a few more hours and a few more hours, and so something you gradually aspire to kind of do, and we try to have meaningful work,
Right.
so that if a group's here for a week, they want some variety and they want to feel like they've made a difference. They want an orientation. So it's kind of making sure it's not just putting on the blinders and all they're going to do is paint this one building. We'd like to try to have them plug into, feel like they've really accomplished something by the time they've left, and they've understood how what they've done meets part of the mission of this place. So so that's just part of the hospitality of it all.
Right. And, when we are directing, and this still continues to this day, one particular weekend, it was called Work Weekend in the spring, helped get camp open and clean up. And it has always been a challenge to make sure that the work is meaningful, not just, or a mix of menial and meaningful. Sometimes you just have to rake leaves. But, that there are other projects that volunteers can see, come back year after year and say, I was involved in that. I helped paint that. And the last time, 12 years ago when it was freshly painted, it's cool to see it repainting it this summer because I was involved in that the first time. And I think it's really important that, and certainly the successes that we had with volunteers came from making those volunteers feel very welcome, making them feel a part of the community, so that even if they, in a situation where they weren't eating meals with us, we would still make sure that they are part of the campfire that happens every night, a real symbol of what camp is, and they'd be welcome to join in singing and just feel a part of that magical moment. That it was true symbolism of the camp. And I like also that you touched on orientation. I think that sometimes if it's a busy time like a work weekend, you forget to do things like welcome new people in and show them around, give them a tour if they've come with a friend. So it's important when you're the person responsible for that group to make sure that they know where things are, know where the washrooms are, where they're going to sleep, and where meals are, and that they feel comfortable in the place. I'd love to see a camp that did some online orientation for volunteers, that they got a little mini course. It's 2 half-hour times that they had to, or 20-minute video and a bit of a quiz or something, that the director would feel better about them coming on site and understanding their responsibilities, but also that person feels more settled into the place because they understand some of the things like meal times and some of the rules maybe, or just what it means to be a volunteer and the effect it's had. I think that goes back to David's point about recording the number of volunteer hours, to be able to report that, to grant bodies, to your own board, or to the community as a whole. If we were able to accomplish this much extra this year because there have been X number of volunteer hours over this past year. So I thank you both for your contribution to this great discussion. I'm really looking forward to hearing from the community. People have some other good ideas about ways they've engaged or recruited or given tasks to volunteers. But if you feel like you've got some good information from David and Joe and me today, we'd really appreciate it if you would just go quickly to camphacker.tv/love. It'll pre-write a tweet for you. You can feel free to customize that and just let people know how you feel about this particular program, about building camp through volunteerism. So we thank you ahead of time for taking the time to do that. It's a big help to us. So this means we're going to change our discussion now. We're going to switch on into our tool of the week.
Tool of the week.
We thank you for being part of this discussion and watching this on YouTube or listening to us in your car, walking the dog, or doing the dishes. We know from people's feedback, including David's when he's not on the show, that the tool of the week is people's often their favorite section of what we do, or the thing that sticks with them, and giving them some practical things to help them do their job as a camp director. So we ask each of our panelists to come with a tool that specifically makes them a better camp director. And Joe, I'd like to start with you today. I think you've got a really cool idea as your tool this week.
Yes, my tool of the week is camp visits. It's something I started, so a couple of weeks ago I was actually in Arkansas. I stayed at Ferncliff with David, and I toured from there. We only stayed 4 days, and I toured 5 different summer camps. So Camp Bear Track, I visited Ferncliff, I visited Aldersgate, the Heifer Ranch, which is like a summer camp but not a summer camp, and I also visited the 4-H Center. And excuse me, the value of these visits is something amazing, because you get to talk to camp people, you get to hear new ideas and hear funding sources and volunteer things and whatnot, and it's very similar to what I did a couple of years ago in Australia when I visited 13 camps over 26 days there. Yeah. There's a certain value to it, and I took along Jessica Tenhor, our summer camp director this year, and it was truly amazing to see the ideas she has brought back as well. So if you're going to use your education funds for something and you can find a friendly camp who will let you stay for the week like Ferncliff did, it's invaluable to do camp tours. And it's different than doing standards visits, because there's no stress. There's no paperwork to fill out. You literally are just, you need a tour guide and someone to show you around, and it is really valuable for your mindset as a camp person to see different ideas. Yeah,
fantastic. It's a great tool. David, you have a couple of cool ones too this week.
Yeah, first one is Boomerang, which is a Gmail program, and it helps you schedule emails. For instance, if I've got a grant deadline and I need to communicate with somebody, it's in my head today, but I know it's not due for 2 weeks and they don't want to see it for 2 weeks. I can write it while I'm thinking about it and just schedule it to go out on the day I want it to go out. And so that's very helpful to me, knowing as to sort of when somebody's going to read something. Yeah. Very helpful. And it's also you can also, if you get an email from somebody that you don't want to see right now because, you're not in that mode, but you want to see it next Wednesday and you'll deal with all of those same emails from the same subject, then you can schedule it to come back to your inbox at the right time. So, so you don't have to have this fractured day where you're bouncing from one thing to another. You can kind of say, okay, I'm going to hold all those and deal with them at the same time, same place. Or you can schedule to send yourself an email. If you think your calendar is not going to be sufficient, schedule an email to come in, an hour ahead of your podcast, and you remind yourself, oh yeah, I got that podcast today. So that's helpful. And the other factor is too, you can, if you have some people that you email and sometimes they don't email right back, and you need to kind of remind yourself, okay, if I haven't heard from that person in a week, I want to be reminded. Right. You can schedule that to kind of come back and, oh yeah, I hadn't heard back from this person. That's a real helpful tool as well. So I like Boomerang, and I'm a big fan of using that almost every day. The other thing that I find that a lot of camps overlook is that there are disaster funds out there that you can tap for certain things. So, I had a storm. I didn't have a tornado, but a storm or ice storm. You can often get disaster funds from folks for things like that at your camp. And a lot of camp directors just doesn't dawn on them. They just, have the mentality that they'll take care of their own. But right. A lot of times people want to help. And we have often tapped disaster funds when we've had, small disasters, you might call them,
Yeah.
come up, or disaster prevention funds.
Right.
So the radios you need at camp, well, that's going to help you in an emergency. And if you spin it to put in that funding request based on, we want to be prepared that if something happens here at camp, we have a way to get in touch with each other. You can fund it, even though it's something you're going to use every day, or a generator,
Right.
or when next time you build a building, a safe room. So if you think disaster mitigation and preparation, sometimes there are funding sources that come to mind that otherwise you wouldn't think about. And I think camp directors might like kind of thinking about that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, those are great. Thank you so much, David.
My pleasure.
So my tool of the week is a book that if you're on YouTube, you can see this on screen. It's called Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. It is... it's web design nerd stuff written in very easy to understand language. I think that there are a lot of big changes to come this next 12 months to the way camps put themselves out on the web. Certainly the Google insistence on a mobile version of your website starting this past month is something that's going to come up part of that, but also just getting better at having our website serve the purpose of helping families, helping our families get to know us better, helping them get to register easier, etc. And so I feel like there's some really big changes coming in the web that way, and camps really need to be aware of that kind of stuff. One of the things that can help you think about that better is this book, which is actually a revised version. You want to make sure you get version 2 of this book called Don't Make Me Think. And honestly, it's not too web nerdy. It'll help you think about the way that your website's set up, even if you're not the designer developer, but you're just they are answering to you about the project. It's nice to have that little bit of knowledge that you can stand up for your ideas and have some evidence to back that up. So highly recommend that book if you're looking for something to read this summer that is not to get your mind off of camp for a while. Maybe that is a good thing. Maybe it's one of those business books that'll help you fall asleep every night. I don't know, but it has been great and certainly influenced my thinking over the years, and was pleased to get to read the revised copy and just finish that this week. So last ask from you folks, if you are watching, again, I've appreciated the tools. You've got any good ideas from David or Joe or anyone in the past, if you wouldn't mind, we'd be so grateful for people to take the time and write a review. I know that both Joe and David have written a review on iTunes before, and so many other people who are great listeners of the show have taken the time to do so, and we're always grateful. And we hope next fall when we come back to be a little better at recognizing the people who've taken the time to do so. Today, it's just an invitation for you to do the same. It is helpful for summer camp professionals to find the podcast if there are more reviews on it. So if you go to camphacker.tv/iTunes, it'll open up the podcast right there in your iTunes, and you can fill in the review there. So we really appreciate that. So, Joe, thank you for persevering and working to get back on the show when your internet's a bit flaky today. We're really grateful, and thank you for your contribution to the show.
Not a problem. Thanks, Travis.
How can people find out about how to get in touch with you?
Well, how to get in touch with me, they can follow Pierce Williams and everything we do at campisbetter.com. Life is good, camp is better. And if you want to connect with me, you can do that through my website, which is yoyojoe.com, YOYOJOE.
Thanks, Joe. And David, thank you for being on too. It was a great topic, and we do really appreciate you sharing all that you've learned through the stuff that you've done at Ferncliff. We're grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, if people have follow-up, how can they get in touch with you?
The best way is through our website. Our brand new website's going to go live next week, just ferncliff.org, and they'll be able to pretty easily find me there. Ferncliff at gmail.com is the easiest way to email me.
Okay, right on. Thanks again, David, for being on. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Good. So if you want to get information, you're listening to this and didn't have time to write down our tools, or you want to check out some of the links to some of the ideas and resources that Joe and David have shared, please go to camphacker.tv/podcast. There you'll find the show notes from this and all of our previous shows. This is episode 82, so there are lots of great resources in there that you can find to help you out thinking, certainly with the big problems at this particular time of year in your life as a camp director, but also some other great big picture things. So again, that's at camphacker.tv/podcast. And thanks for the evening, friends.
The Camp Hacker podcast is brought to you by Beth and Travis Allison, summer camp leadership training and marketing consultants. Thanks for listening. Camp Hacker, bringing your world into focus.
Hey, it's Travis. Camp directors often tell me they're just too tired to take on anything new. That's exactly why my free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic exists. It doesn't add work, it shows you progress. Quick, free, repeatable, you'll know if your systems are paying off without the guesswork. Try it today at camp.mba/Travis. That's camp.mba/Travis.